Hey there, Blue Mages, and welcome back to Blue Academy. My name is Liam, and I will be your teacher. In our last video, we looked at the core spells that we're going to take as every single role on Blue Mage, and that's these 14 here. We grabbed Mimicry, our Res, Primal spells, some utility spells, Bristle, and Song of Torment. Today, we're going to build on that to build out our DPS spell loadout, as well as talk about some of the basics of playing DPS on Blue Mage. The first three spells that I'm going to add here is going to be my Final Sting combo, and that's going to be Moon Flute, Whistle, and Final Sting. Now, Whistle and Final Sting we're really only going to be using to finish off a boss, and we'll talk about that later. And Moon Flute really unlocks the maximum DPS potential of Blue Mage, and we'll talk about that as well. But from a high level, it basically gives us a phase of 15 seconds where we do a lot of damage, followed by 15 seconds of 0 damage. And I'll talk about why that's actually good for us in a little bit. The next thing that we need to add are our Libra spells. So for Libra, we need a physical, an astral, and an umbral spell. So let's grab a physical spell first. So our two main ones for this are going to be Sharpened Knife and Abyssal Transfixion. A Sharpened Knife is a 220 potency spell, melee range, and it's a fast cast, which means we can use it for weaving. Abyssal Transfixion is a 220 potency spell, ranged, and it's not a fast cast, so we cannot use it for weaving. There are some other physical spells here. There's Galt, which is a melee cone one. We don't really use this one. It's kind of the worst of both worlds with Sharpened Knife and Transfixion. Drill cannons, but it has less potency. Fire Angun, also less potency, and Revenge Blast, which does have some use in some Blue Mage fights, but, you know, we're not going to use this as our main spell. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and grab Sharpened Knife. The next thing that we need to grab is our Astral spell, and that's going to be Fire, Lightning, and Wind. Now if we sort by that, we now see we have these spells to choose from, and there are some that I feel are optimal. Now, we can look at Glower, Alpine Draught, Reflux, Sonic Boom, and Electrogenesis. Now, these are all going to be ranged spells, and they're all going to be 220 base potency, except for Sonic Boom, which is only 210. Now, most people end up taking Electrogenesis, and that's what I take usually as well, and that's just a nice, reliable AoE splash, 220 potency on your main target spell. You could take Alpine Draught, but sometimes aiming this is a little bit tough. It can be a little bit difficult to actually aim this, just because it shoots in a straight line, so I've missed this quite a few times, and if you miss, then that's a big potency loss. Glower is not bad. I would also consider taking Glower. It just has a slightly shorter range than Electrogenesis. And then there's also Reflux, and Reflux is fine too, and this is actually really good if you have a need to not be doing AoE damage, and there are some cases where you want to be just, you know, doing single target damage. There's also Sonic Boom, and this one has slightly less potency than the other options, but this is our other weaving option as a Blue Mage. So if we're not taking Sharpened Knife, we can take Sonic Boom. And we use this for weaving, and if we look at this, it's 10 potency less than Sharpened Knife, but it does get affected by Peculiar Light, which increases our magic damage by 5%. So actually, if we have Peculiar Light up, Sonic Boom is doing just as much damage as Sharpened Knife. But for this example, I'm just going to grab Electrogenesis. Finally, we have to grab our Umbral Spell. Now for this, we definitely have fewer options. For Umbral, we have Water Cannon, Aqua Breath, Plane Cracker, Ram's Voice, Protean Wave, and Northerlies. Now, of these, the only ones that have 220 potency are Protean Wave, Ram's Voice, Northerlies, and Plane Cracker. And there's some issues with pretty much all of these. Now, Plane Cracker and Ram's Voice are both short-range AoEs, so if I drag these on my bar and cast them, you can see they're just little AoEs. And that can be fine if we're doing a mostly melee fight, and in fact, if it's mostly melee, I probably will take Ram's Voice or Plane Cracker. We also have Northerlies, and this is a sort of like Ice Breath spell. This one's kind of okay as well for only melee, but you run the risk of missing the enemy if there's a lot of movement. If the boss is being moved or something, and you you're facing your cone one way and they run past it, you might not hit them. So generally, we're not going to take Northerlies. Finally, we have Protean Wave, and Protean Wave is a spell that is a cone attack like that, but it also does have a slightly longer range than the other options. So Planecracker and Ram's Voice are a 6 Yalm AoE, whereas Protean Wave is a 15 Yalm ranged cone. This one's really good if we're going to be at sort of a mid-range for most of the fight. This one also has the same issue of Northerlies, where we run the risk of missing the enemy entirely, but in most cases I feel like this is going to be our strongest option. Now, it also has this component that's the 15 Yalm knockback. This is awful in dungeons. If we're running dungeons, we're not going to want to take this because we'll just be blasting things all over the place. So for dungeons, I definitely recommend Ram's Voice or Planecracker. But Protean Wave is really good for raiding, where the enemies will not actually be pushed back. One more spell that we're going to want to grab is going to be either Off Guard, which increases the target's damage taken by 5%, or Peculiar Light, which increases the magic damage taken by nearby enemies by 5%. Now, these share a cooldown, but they do stack. So we could have one blue mage put up Off Guard and one blue mage put up Peculiar Light, and we're effectively getting a 10% magic damage increase and 5% physical damage increase. And this is pretty good. Now, which one you take here doesn't really matter too much, but if you're doing raiding, I would coordinate with your group to figure out who's going to get Off Guard and who's going to get Peculiar Light. Now, in a truly optimal world, you'd be able to have both up 100% of the time. This lasts for 15 seconds and it has a 1 minute cooldown, so you can get 4 cycles per 1 minute. And if you have 4 blue mages with Off Guard and 4 blue mages with Peculiar Light, you can get 100% uptime. So I would just talk with your group, figure out what you need, and then grab that. If you're running dungeons, Peculiar Light's probably going to be your best option because you're going to be doing a lot of AoEing, and this will hit multiple enemies. So you can pull, put up Peculiar Light, and then just start blasting. But in most dungeons, you'll just be using instant death spells anyway, so this doesn't really help too much. But for dungeons like the Vault, where enemies are not, level 50 or 60, this is actually going to be pretty good. The last 3 spells here largely depend on what we're actually doing, so we'll just refer to these as our utility slots. And really, we can take whatever we want here, but for each encounter, there might be something that's best. For example, Dragon's Voice is going to be really solid for A12S, the Soul of the Creator. For many fights, the level 50 ones especially, and actually only the level 50 fights, we'd take things like Missile or level 5 Death, and those are pretty helpful. We're not usually going to take Libra as a DPS. Usually we're just trying to maximize our uptime, and we'll let the tank do Libra if they can. If they're not able to, then a healer will usually get that. There might be fights where we're going to use a Veil, such as T13, where we're going to cheese Earthshakers, or Frog Legs, where we need to taunt something off of a tank to reposition it. This all really depends on what the fight is, and for each fight, I'm going to try to have a guide to try to outline what spells you're going to take for that. But if you're just running dungeons, you can grab pretty much any spells that you want there. Any spells that you think are cool or helpful are definitely going to be viable here. Now we're going to talk about Moon Flute. So, once we cast this, you can see we start looking spooky, we're very red, running very quickly, and we're also doing 50% more damage. So, here we just start running around and casting things, using our primals, etc. Big damage, but once this Waxing Nocturne runs out, then we get Waning Nocturne. And now we're really sad, we can't use any spells, and our DPS is effectively 0 during this time. So, why do we actually even bother using Moon Flute? I'll break that down now. Now, in a standard rotation, given 30 seconds, which is the duration of Moon Flute counting both the waxing and the waning phase, we will be able to cast Bristle, Song of Torment, all of our primal spells, and a total of 8 filler spells. So given this, we have a Song of Torment with 550 base potency, which is boosted by 50% with Bristle. We then have 8 filler spells coming in at 220 potency each, as well as all of our primal spells, which total 3,250 potency. Altogether, this gives us a final potency of 5,835 potency. This is pretty good, but we can actually do a little bit better. It turns out that we can fit all of our primal spells, a Bristled Song of Torment, and 2 filler spells into our 15-second waxing window. This gives us a base potency of 4,515. If we then multiply this by the 1.5 Moon Flute modifier, we get a total potency of 6,772 potency. So overall, even though we're only attacking in that 15-second window, we actually get 1,000 potency over not using Moon Flute in the first place. And this could be pretty handy, because some phases you might only have 15 seconds to attack. This turns out to be a massive DPS increase, and this really allows Blue Mage to skip a lot of phases, and also just really pump the DPS. Take a look at this video from a Brute Justice clear. During the phase transition, they have many of their Blue Mages using the Moon Flute opener. Look at how quickly this boss just absolutely melts. Now, doing the Moon Flute opener isn't an exact science, and it really just takes some practice and getting down the muscle memory, but it's really not that bad. The main idea is that we want to cast Bristle well before we're ready to pull. Then we will cast Moon Flute about 4 seconds before we're going to pull. After that, we open with Song of Torment, and then start using all of our primals. The actual order for this doesn't matter too much, but we do want to try to weave our instant casts like Glass Dance, Shock Strike, and Eruption with our weaving spells like Devour, Magic Hammer, and Sharpened Knife. Additionally, we want our last spells to be one of our weaving spells, all 4 of our Serpunica casts, and then a final weaving spell. This gives us the final potency of 6,360. Now, we're also going to be using Moon Flute for our final Sting combo, and this is what we use to finish off bosses in Trials and Raids. This does a staggering 2,000 potency. If it's then boosted by Moon Flute, we gain an additional 50%, and with Whistle, an additional 80% on top of that. With both of these buffs up, Final Sting is going to be hitting for 5,400 potency total. With one single spell, that's almost as much as our entire Moon Flute opener. This means we can do disgusting amounts of damage to finish off a boss. Alright, so that's it for DPS basics as a Blue Mage. It comes down to really nailing your Moon Flute opener, knowing when to Final Sting, and using the proper Libra attuned spells. If you can get those 3 things down, you'll be doing some really solid DPS as a Blue Mage. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, good luck stinging!